Here's a lovely story about when Neville Goddard was still learning how to use his imagination, manifested a trip home to Barbados. If you're new to his teachings, Neville Goddard was a 20th century metaphysical teacher who pioneered the teachings of the law of assumption. Before Neville started teaching his philosophies, he lived in New York as a professional dancer. But in 1933, he didn't have a job and was broke. You see, this was during the Great Depression. At this time, nobody had any money, so all the theatres and music halls were closed. In October, Neville's parents came to visit him. They lived in Barbados and hadn't seen Neville for a few years. As he waved goodbye to them, they pleaded with him to go back home with them, since he hadn't been to the island for many years, but he declined. Then, after they had left, he had a feeling, a burning desire to go to Barbados, but he was too late to join them. So Neville went to seek advice from his friend Abdullah. Abdullah was an Ethiopian rabbi who mentored Neville and a few others, including Joseph Murphy, who became another well-known metaphysical teacher. Abdullah was fluent in Hebrew and taught his people that if they use their imagination in a certain way, what they see in their mind's eye would reflect in the physical world. As Neville had only started learning these principles, he was still struggling to pay the rent and was wondering where his next meal was coming from, whereas Abdullah, having mastered these principles, was very prosperous and lived in a swanky apartment on 72nd Street. In Abdullah's apartment, Neville shared his desire with him and complained that he had no money to afford the trip. "I want to go to Barbados, but I don't know how." Abdullah understood this desire and replied with the instructions, "Tonight, when you go to sleep, you will sleep in Barbados." Neville was confused. Sleep in Barbados?" "Yes, you sleep in Barbados, because you are in Barbados." Neville wasn't sure he fully understood the concept, but went home eager to carry out the exercise. So that night, while falling into a deeply relaxed state called Sats, a state akin to sleep, Neville imagined he was now sleeping in his childhood bed in Barbados, and that New York was physically over 2,000 miles north of himself. He then imagined himself walking down the narrow streets, lined with tiny, colourful buildings. He could feel the autumn sun's warmth on his body, and he smelt the distinct aromas of his childhood island. He was home again. Even though he religiously repeated the exercise for over a month, nothing seemed to happen. So feeling disillusioned, Neville went back to Abdullah for some more advice. "Abdullah, if I don't make it to the next boat out, I won't make it to Barbados." Abdullah would have none of it and told him, "Who told you you're going to Barbados? You are in Barbados. When you're in Barbados, you can't discuss how you're going to Barbados, because you're already in Barbados." With that, Abdullah left the room and slammed the door behind him. Neville knew him well enough that this was his cue to leave. As Abdullah had finished the discussions for the day, it finally dawned on Neville as he realised where he was going wrong. He was trying to focus on how to find the means to get to Barbados, but if he was already there was nothing to discuss. So with this renewed sense of hopefulness, he went to bed that night and completely immersed himself in the exercise that he was now in his bed in Barbados. 2 days later, on the 4th of December, Neville received a letter from his brother Victor, whom he hadn't heard from in a while. In his letter, Victor commanded that as Neville was not currently working, he had no excuse to not come to Barbados, especially as the whole family was gathering for Christmas for the first time in many years. His brother then explained he had arranged with the Furnace Withy shipping company for Neville to purchase a first-class ticket and charge it to him. He also knew that since Neville hadn't had any money for a while, he enclosed a $50 draft for Neville to buy anything he needed, like some new clothes for the trip. However, when Neville arrived at the shipping company, they told him that even though they had space on the next boat departing on the 6th of December, they could only offer him storage, which was third class, for most of the journey. Then when the ship docked at the Virgin Islands, as a passenger would be leaving the ship, Neville could then travel the rest of the journey first class. Even though this wasn't the ideal scenario, Neville didn't mind, as he was grateful to be returning home. So with his ticket in hand, he went to see Abdullah and tell him his news, even though he would be travelling third class for part of the way. But Abdullah was not pleased. "He's talking of going to Barbados. You have gone to Barbados and you went first class." And like before, that was the end of the discussion. So on the 6th of December, Neville arrived at the Furness Withy line at Pier 95, freshly dressed with his passport and papers, expecting to travel third class for part of the way. But on arrival, he was informed by a shipping agent that a first class passenger had cancelled their trip, so Neville was upgraded to a first class ticket for the entire voyage. So Neville travelled to Barbados first class for free, exactly like his desire, enjoyed 3 lovely months with his family. What I love about this story is that it demonstrates how you can implement these teachings into your life, and it also shows you how much Neville had to develop these skills himself. To begin with, he had to ignore his current circumstances, as he had no money to finance the trip. Then, he had to persist in his assumption that he was already in Barbados, even though he didn't see any evidence until the very last minute. So when you have a moment of doubt, remember the mantra, "You are in Barbados," to transfer you back into the state of the wish fulfilled. Then remember that all is well. Thank you for watching. I hope to see you again.